I had never smelled such decadence before, nor sensed danger in something as simple as a bite of food. In the villa of Gaius Aemilius, every dish was a temptation and a secret waiting to be uncovered. The marble floors gleamed under the late afternoon sun, polished to a sheen that reflected the towering columns and intricate mosaics of the triclinium. I stepped carefully, aware that each footfall echoed faintly, as if the villa itself were listening. Outside, the garden swayed in the gentle Roman breeze, filled with the scent of jasmine and the soft hum of insects. But inside, a different perfume dominated the heady mix of roasting meats, honey, and exotic spices that hinted at faraway lands. Gaius Aemilius was known throughout Rome, not just for his wealth, but for his infamous banquets. Senators, merchants, and even freedmen of influence would whisper about his tables hidden passages where indulgence became ritual and culinary skill veered dangerously close to obsession. Tonight, I was to witness one of these feasts firsthand. The villa was designed to impress and intimidate. Frescoes depicted Bacchus, the god of wine, dancing with mortals in eternal celebration. Statues of Roman ancestors, their eyes carved in stone with unnerving realism, seemed to watch every movement. Servants moved with silent precision, carrying trays that glinted like treasure. Peacock tongues, dormice stuffed with nuts and honey, and fish transported over hundreds of miles, preserved in brine and delicately spiced. Yet the true allure lay not in the abundance of food, but in the secrets it concealed. Guests leaned close to one another, whispering in low tones. Rumors told of dishes that tested the boundaries of taste and taboo exotic ingredients, aphrodisiacs, and delicacies so rare that procuring them required subterfuge and bribery. Some claimed that the chef, a freedman who had traveled across Alexandria, had mastered recipes forbidden in polite Roman society. I took my place among the guests, feeling the weight of history pressing against the walls. Every glance, every whispered conversation, felt like part of a delicate dance. The first course arrived, a shimmering display of fruits and spiced meats. I watched as a young senator hesitated, lifting a morsel to his lips with a mixture of awe and fear. The dish carried with it more than flavor. It carried status, power, and the implicit warning that indulgence without caution could destroy a man. Outside, the sound of the villa's fountain was steady and reassuring, a soft counterpoint to the tension inside. Torches flickered, throwing long shadows across marble floors, stretching statues into menacing shapes. I could almost hear the villa breathing, alive with whispered histories, secrets of power, and silent complicity. Gaius Aemilius reclined at the head of the table, observing his guests with sharp, calculating eyes. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only the satisfaction of a man who understood that in Rome, the act of dining could be a performance, a display of knowledge, and a test of courage. His guests knew that what they ate was not merely sustenance, it was an assertion of their place in society, and an admission of their willingness to embrace the forbidden. By the time the second course arrived, fish preserved with rare salts and herbs imported from the far reaches of the empire, the villa had transformed into a theater of intrigue. Each bite was a conversation, each sip of wine a silent negotiation. I noticed subtle exchanges of glances, slight tensing of hands, and murmurs that carried hidden meanings. This was a world where curiosity and caution were entwined, where every indulgence had its price. And yet, even amidst such refinement, the villa held its mysteries. Servants moved in hidden corridors, and I could sense passages behind walls, rooms unseen, perhaps holding secrets that would never be revealed. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that prickles at the back of the neck, as though the villa itself were holding its breath. It was then that I realized the true feast was not in the flavors alone. It was in the tension, the secrets, the delicate balance between pleasure and danger. In Rome, the elite dined not merely to satisfy hunger, but to wield influence, to impress, and to assert daring. Every morsel, Every spice carried meaning beyond taste. It carried history and power and an unspoken warning. The night deepened, and the triclinium seemed to shrink around us, the warm glow of oil lamps flickering against marble walls, now casting shadows that danced like living spirits. Each course brought new aromas, more daring combinations, and an almost palpable thrill of transgression. It wasn't merely the food, it was the forbidden, the exotic, the dangerous whisper of indulgence that intoxicated the guests far more than wine ever could. Gaius Aemilius, reclining on his ornate lectus, gestured for the next course. Servants emerged from hidden alcoves, carrying silver platters that gleamed unnaturally in the firelight. On them were dishes that even the boldest Roman might hesitate to taste: wildfowl fattened on figs, dormice glazed in honey and poppy seeds, and a rare delicacy rumored to be imported from the distant lands of India, a spiced, golden-hued fish that shimmered like molten metal. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly. Whispers swirled like smoke, carrying tales of previous feasts where a single bite had ruined reputations, ended alliances, or even cost lives. I noticed a senator leaning slightly forward, his eyes darting toward the chef. He was clearly aware that more than taste was at stake. Each dish was a test of courage, a silent challenge to his sophistication and discretion. I followed the subtle movements around the room, noting the silent hierarchy at play. Younger guests watched the veterans, attempting to decipher which morsels to eat, which to avoid, and which actions would earn them favor or suspicion. Every glance, every measured sip of wine, carried a weight far greater than the physical act itself. The feast had become a theater of unspoken power, a ritual where indulgence and intrigue intertwined seamlessly. The chef, a man of remarkable precision and mysterious origin, moved silently between tables, presenting each dish with an almost ritualistic grace. He whispered ingredients to those bold enough to ask, revealing secrets of spices and herbs that the average Roman could never hope to procure. There were aphrodisiacs, yes, but also ingredients that enhanced alertness, clarity, and even subtle influence over others at the table. Each bite was more than nourishment, it was manipulation, a tool in the complex dance of social dominance. From my vantage point, I could see the tension rise as Gaius Aemilius initiated a game known only to those invited. He would pass a dish, ask for opinions, and watch the reactions carefully. Those who spoke too freely were subtly humiliated. Those who refused were noted as timid or ignorant, and those who participated with clever commentary earned his approval. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet devastating in its effect on the social hierarchy. Outside, the garden's gentle rustle and the distant fountain offered a fragile counterpoint to the intensity within. But even beyond the walls, the villa seemed to hum with secret life. I could not shake the sense that hidden chambers and passages held secrets beyond culinary skill letters, bribes, forbidden trysts, and artifacts of power tucked away where only the bold or desperate might find them. The villa itself was a labyrinth of influence, a microcosm of Roman ambition and avarice. I turned my attention back to the table, noting a strange exchange between two older senators. Their conversation was veiled, full of half-words and sidelong glances. It appeared that a particular dish, the golden-hued fish, was more than a delicacy. It was a token, a message, a symbol of trust or betrayal, depending on how it was received. I realized then that the feast was layered in meanings far beyond the immediate pleasure of taste. Every ingredient, every presentation, was part of a network of signals and intentions, a web of intrigue woven delicately across the dinner table. The tension escalated when Gaius himself leaned forward, speaking softly but with the sharpness of command. "Who among you dares try the last plate?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The room held its collective breath. This was no ordinary dish, it was a test of audacity, cunning, and discretion. Some guests feigned courage, others faltered, their hesitation revealing more than they intended. I felt the magnetic pull of the forbidden, the undeniable thrill of being part of something secret and dangerous. And yet, the deeper I observed, the clearer it became. The villa was more than a site of culinary experimentation. It was a stage where human desires, lust, ambition, fear, and cunning were enacted with precision and ritual. The feasts were a lens through which power could be measured, alliances tested, and secrets exchanged. A dish might delight the palate, but it could also manipulate a mind, reveal loyalties, and decide futures. By the time the night had progressed to the penultimate course, I realized I was no longer a mere observer. I was participating, knowingly or not, in a web of influence older than the stones beneath my feet. The villa held its breath alongside me, aware of each subtle shift in expression, each quiet decision, each morsel swallowed with care or hesitation. In the glow of the lamps, I understood that this was Rome in microcosm, beautiful, decadent, and lethal in ways that were invisible to those who did not know how to look. The air in the triclinium had thickened. Wine-sweetened breath mingled with the lingering perfume of roasted meats and rare spices, creating a heady fog that dulled senses while sharpening intrigue. Every whisper, every glance, every carefully measured gesture now carried weight. The villa had shifted from a theater of indulgence into a stage for unmasking secrets. Gaius Aemilius reclined, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Tonight," he said softly, almost conspiratorially, "we do more than dine, we reveal." The words sent a ripple through the room. Some laughed nervously, others stiffened, realizing that the true feast was not on the platters, but hidden beneath the layers of conversation, observation, and subtle signaling. I watched as a tray was brought forth, its contents obscured by a delicate silver dome. When lifted, the last dish of the evening was revealed. A rare bird, its flesh marinated in exotic spices and gilded with honey, shimmering unnaturally under the lamplight. But it was not the bird itself that commanded attention. It was what Gaius had done before presenting it. A folded note had been tucked beneath the platter, its presence known only to a select few. A murmur passed through the table. One of the older senators paled visibly. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for a goblet of wine. The room held its collective breath. Gaius's eyes flicked toward me briefly, and I felt the weight of the villa's history pressing down, the silent testimony of centuries of power, secrecy, and human folly. It became clear that the feast had been a trap, not a violent one, but a social and political test, perfectly disguised in the guise of indulgence. Each dish had been a message, each flavor a symbol, and each morsel a measure of courage, discretion, or folly. Those who had eaten boldly without consideration had exposed themselves. Those who had observed silently and calculated carefully had gained insight, influence, or favor. I noticed subtle exchanges, a senator sliding the note toward another, a hush of recognition between conspirators, the tightening of jaws in those whose confidence had betrayed them. It was a dance of power, veiled by culinary artistry. The villa itself seemed to pulse with the drama, every statue and fresco absorbing the tension, every flicker of flame amplifying the stakes. The chef emerged, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He carried no food this time, only a small carved box containing a spice so rare it could only have come from the distant reaches of India. Its scent was intoxicating, heady and sharp, hinting at potency both literal and symbolic. "Use it wisely," Gaius intoned, his voice low, "for it is not the taste alone that matters, but what you do with it afterward." At that moment, I understood the full scope of the villa's secret. The feasts were never merely about consumption. They were a currency, a weapon, a test of judgment, courage, and perception. To eat without understanding was to surrender oneself to manipulation. To observe without participation was to risk exclusion. And to misstep even slightly could result in social exile or political ruin. The young senator, who had hesitated at the first course, now sat rigid, eyes darting to the folded note. which revealed a debt, a favor owed, and a warning of unspoken alliances. I realized then that everyone at the table had been drawn into a web of obligations, debts, and covert agreements, all hidden beneath the veneer of culinary luxury. Gaius had orchestrated it masterfully, turning a simple meal into an intricate game of influence. By the time the final wine was poured, the room was quiet except for the soft clinking of goblets. The lamps flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally, giving the impression of statues moving, of history itself watching. I felt a strange exhilaration, an intoxicating blend of fear and admiration, as the villa's true purpose revealed itself. This was more than a house. It was a crucible of power, taste, and secrecy, a place where the elite were tested, measured, and occasionally undone. As I rose to leave, the villa seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had held it taut for hours. The echoes of whispered secrets lingered, the faint scent of spices and roasted game still in the air. I realized that what I had witnessed was not merely a banquet, it was an initiation into a hidden world, one where knowledge, taste, and courage intersected in ways that few would ever comprehend. Gaius watched the departing guests with satisfaction, as if reading invisible scores on the walls, tracking the subtle victories and failures of each participant. The villa returned to silence, but the lessons, the tension, and the secrets of the night would linger far longer. Rome itself, I realized, existed not only in its streets and forums, but in these hidden chambers, where every bite could decide fate, and every glance could betray intention. The villa had grown quiet, but its presence was alive, heavy with secrets that lingered long after the guests had departed. I lingered in the triclinium, inhaling the lingering scents of honey, roasted game, and rare spices, feeling the weight of the night press in from every marble surface. The flickering lamps had burned low, casting shadows that seemed to whisper the stories of every banquet held within these walls. Gaius Iamilius remained at his seat, alone now, surveying the emptied room with the calm satisfaction of a man who had witnessed the theater of his own making. In silence, he seemed to catalogue the unspoken victories, the subtle betrayals, the quiet triumphs and failures of those who had dared to dine at his table. The villa had done its work, exposing ambition, testing loyalty, and immortalizing desire in ways that few could comprehend. I walked slowly to the window, peering out over the gardens bathed in moonlight. The fountain murmured softly, a gentle reminder that life outside continued unaffected by the complex dramas enacted within. Yet I could not shake the feeling that the villa itself had left its mark on everyone who had been present. Guests had left with more than satiated appetites. They carried secrets, debts, and alliances hidden in every morsel, in every sip of wine, in every subtle glance. The chef appeared quietly in the doorway, holding nothing but a small silver bowl, its contents dark and mysterious. He said nothing, but the message was clear. Some knowledge, some indulgences were meant to linger, not for immediate consumption, but as a reminder of the invisible currents that governed Roman society. The spices, the rare ingredients, the meticulously crafted dishes, they were instruments, carefully honed to reveal human ambition and fear. As I turned back to the room, I realized the true magnitude of what I had witnessed. These banquets were more than displays of wealth or culinary prowess. They were microcosms of Rome itself. In the safety of marble walls and flickering lamps, power was exercised with subtlety, manipulation with elegance, and influence with the quiet precision of a surgeon's hand. To dine here was to participate in history, to witness the invisible currents that shaped empires, and to understand that indulgence was always intertwined with consequence. The villa seemed to breathe, settling back into its eternal silence. But I could feel it lingering in me, the thrill, the danger, the intoxicating knowledge that even in apparent luxury, Rome's elite had always played with fire under the guise of pleasure. Every dish, every spice, every careful gesture had been a test, and the results would ripple through social circles, political alliances, and whispered conversations for months to come. Stepping outside, I breathed the cool night air, letting it cleanse the senses overwhelmed by the richness within. The villa stood behind me, imposing and secretive, its stories locked within walls and hidden chambers. I realized that, for all its grandeur and excess, it was ultimately a place of revelation, a reminder that human desire, ambition, and curiosity could be both beautiful and perilous, and that even the smallest indulgence might carry consequences invisible to the untrained eye. In Rome, history is not written only on scrolls or monuments. It is written in moments like these, in shadowed villas where the wealthy test the boundaries of taste, power, and secrecy. And long after the lamps have burned out and the guests have departed, the villa remembers. It remembers every whisper, every daring bite, every glance that revealed more than words could ever say. And in that memory lies the true feast, a hidden, intoxicating banquet of ambition, indulgence, and the dark, eternal intrigue of the elite. As I walked away from the villa that night, I understood that the forbidden feasts of Gaius Aemilius were more than culinary excess. They were lessons in human nature, whispered from one generation to the next, waiting for the curious, the bold, and the daring to uncover them. And I knew, as the cool night air brushed my face, that the villa's secrets would never truly die. They would linger, as potent and intoxicating as the richest spices, forever echoing through Rome. Dawn broke over the villa, but sleep had eluded me. The night's excesses lingered in my mind like an intoxicating perfume. I wandered the corridors, noting the quiet grandeur, frescoed walls depicting myths and heroes, mosaic floors underfoot, and hidden doorways whose purpose remained a mystery. Here, even silence seemed deliberate, charged with unspoken intentions. I found the library, a small room lined with scrolls and ledgers, where Gaius recorded his transactions and observations. Among the volumes lay detailed notes of ingredients, trade routes, and recipes, but also records of guests who dared, who faltered, who betrayed, and subtle marks beside each name. I realized that the villa was a living archive of influence. Every meal had been documented, every reaction catalogued, and every secret stored, like a shadow empire of taste and power. Servants moved silently through the corridors, carrying trays of wine and bread for early risers. Their eyes betrayed the knowledge they had of the villa's nightly rituals, yet they remained indifferent to the human drama above them. It was as if the villa itself had trained them to observe, to serve, and to witness without interference. A sudden noise in the garden drew my attention. I approached the window and saw figures moving through the morning mist, likely other guests lingering to extend their connections or secure a favor whispered in private during the previous night. I realized that the villa's power extended far beyond its walls. Its influence shaped politics, alliances, and social hierarchies throughout Rome. The second night of the banquet revealed a different layer of the villa's intrigue. Word had spread among the elite. Those who had participated in the first feast carried new prestige or new vulnerabilities. Gaius, ever the master of timing, orchestrated a smaller, more exclusive gathering, emphasizing delicacy and secrecy over sheer abundance. This time, the courses were subtler. Rare herbs and vegetables replaced exotic meats. Wines were infused with scents that hinted at distant lands. Desserts carried hidden messages in the form of shapes and flavors. The purpose was clear. The first feast had tested boldness. This one tested perception and insight. Those who understood symbolism and could decode the dishes earned favor. Those who merely indulged revealed themselves as naive or manipulable. I watched closely as a young senator, previously timid, surprised everyone by interpreting a dessert correctly, revealing knowledge of both trade routes and culinary secrets. Gaius's eyes lit with approval. In a single moment, power shifted quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow moving across marble floors. It became clear that the villa's feasts were lessons in politics as much as gastronomy. Every dish, every spice, every arrangement on the table carried intention. Guests were actors, and the villa was both stage and director, shaping events unseen yet profoundly felt. By the third gathering, tensions among the guests had reached a delicate peak. Rumors had spread. A few had been noted by Gaius as untrustworthy, others as cunning allies. The villa seemed almost alive, waiting for the drama to unfold. The feast was no longer merely indulgence, it was revelation. The centerpiece of the evening was a dish rumored to be the most daring in Rome, a preparation of pheasant in rare spices that were said to grant not just flavor but influence, enhancing persuasion and charm. As the platter was placed, I saw subtle exchanges of glances. Some took small bites cautiously, others dove in boldly, flaunting fearlessness. Each action was measured, each hesitation noted. The villa's hidden chambers seemed to pulse with anticipation. Servants moved with extraordinary precision, aware that their movements were observed not only by the guests but perhaps by Gaius himself, who had eyes everywhere. In this microcosm of Roman elite life, influence was wielded not by force, but by subtlety through food, observation, and discretion. By the evening's end, alliances had shifted. Some whispered agreements had been sealed, and subtle rivalries had intensified. I realized then that the villa functioned as a crucible, forging relationships, revealing weaknesses, and crafting opportunities, all under the guise of culinary splendor. The final part of this extended series arrived with an almost ceremonial solemnity. Guests who had survived the previous feasts now understood that participation in the villa's rituals required more than appetite. It demanded perception, cunning, and courage. The last banquet was less about spectacle and more about revelation, a final reckoning for those who had dared to partake. A single dish was presented, a delicately roasted swan, glazed with honey and perfumed with rare spices from beyond the empire's reach. Alongside it was a scroll, detailing subtle favors, debts, and allegiances. Those who understood its meaning gained insight. Those who did not risked embarrassment or marginalization. The villa, in effect, passed judgment silently, yet profoundly. I left the triclinium one final time, the villa's secrets heavy in my mind. Outside, the morning sun reflected off fountains and marble statues, serene and untouched, masking the intense drama that had unfolded under its roof. I understood that the villa's power lay not only in wealth or cuisine, but in its mastery of human nature, the ability to manipulate, test, and observe, turning indulgence into instrument and pleasure into revelation. Even now, centuries later, I imagine the villa standing silently, remembering every feast, every secret, every glance, and I knew that the forbidden feasts of Gaius Aemilius would remain a testament to the subtle, intoxicating, and perilous art of indulgence in Rome, an eternal dance of desire, power, and intrigue. The villa had settled into an almost eerie calm, but I could sense it still breathed with the memories of countless feasts. The morning light filtered through the high windows, illuminating intricate mosaics that depicted gods and mortals locked in eternal revelry. I wandered toward the atrium, tracing the marble patterns with my fingers, feeling the echoes of whispered conversations, hushed laughter, and subtle threats from the previous nights. A servant, unusually hesitant, approached me with a silver tray holding a small cup of perfumed wine. "For insight, if you wish," he said in a quiet tone. The scent was intoxicating cinnamon, dates, and something undefinable that teased the mind. I realized then that the villa's lessons extended beyond the table. Even in the absence of guests, the place continued to instruct, testing perception and restraint. In the distance, I could hear faint sounds of the city waking, but here, time seemed suspended. The villa existed in its own rhythm, a silent chronicle of indulgence, strategy, and human frailty. Every corner held potential discovery, hidden compartments in cupboards, letters tucked beneath cushions, and even secret stairways that led to unknown chambers. By evening, the villa prepared for yet another gathering. Word had traveled fast among Rome's elite. Those who had experienced the previous feasts were now expected to return, either to solidify alliances or risk losing influence. This gathering was smaller, more clandestine, held in a private chamber illuminated by oil lamps and surrounded by tapestries that muffled sound and created a sense of intimacy and secrecy. The dishes were subtler now, almost deceptively simple, yet each ingredient carried meaning. A dessert might hint at loyalty, a savory course could test knowledge of trade networks, and even wine held coded messages for the astute. I watched as a diplomat from the provinces studied each plate with meticulous care, his face a mask of neutrality, though his eyes betrayed both fascination and apprehension. Gaius observed quietly, a master orchestrator, noting reactions, measuring hesitations, and marking those who could discern meaning from those who could not. By the end of the evening, the villa had once again rearranged its social hierarchy, subtly elevating some while diminishing others, all through the art of taste, perception, and restraint. Late into the night, the villa revealed another layer of its power. Hidden chambers, discovered only by those brave enough to wander the corridors, contained private libraries, rare artifacts, and personal letters documenting past feasts and the fates of previous guests. It was a silent testament to the enduring reach of Gaius's influence, a careful archive of ambition, loyalty, and subtle manipulation. I found myself drawn to a narrow hallway lined with frescoes depicting feasts of the gods. The colors seemed almost alive in the flickering lamplight, telling stories of indulgence and excess that mirrored the events I had just witnessed. Here, the villa was not only a setting, it was a participant, a silent, omnipotent narrator, recording every glance, every morsel, and every whispered word. By now, the lessons of the villa were undeniable. Indulgence alone was meaningless without awareness. Power could be asserted quietly, and every action, even a seemingly trivial bite of food, could shift alliances and reputations. The villa had become an arena of intellect, courage, and subtlety, where the stakes were invisible yet infinitely consequential. The final act unfolded under a sky streaked with moonlight. A private guest arrived unexpectedly, carrying a rare spice from the far reaches of the empire, a gift meant to test the acumen of those present. The villa's last lesson of the night was one of discernment and understanding, to recognize the power of subtlety, the significance of restraint, and the consequences of miscalculation. As the feast concluded, I walked the corridors one last time. The air was thick with memory. The scent of roasted meats, perfumed wine, and exotic spices lingered like a phantom. I realized that the villa's greatest power lay not in its architecture, wealth, or culinary skill, but in its mastery over human nature. Every guest, every dish, and every whisper had been a thread in an intricate tapestry of influence and secrecy. The villa remained, eternal and inscrutable, holding within it centuries of forbidden knowledge, lessons of desire and ambition, and reminders that indulgence in Rome was never purely a pleasure. It was an art, a science, and a test. Even in silence, it continued to teach, to observe, and to preserve the intoxicating and perilous dance of power. Night had fallen completely, and the villa seemed to exhale a slow, deliberate breath, as though acknowledging the secrets it had safeguarded for centuries. Guests who lingered whispered quietly among themselves, sharing glances heavy with understanding or suspicion. The tables were cleared of dishes, yet the lingering scents, roasted meats, honeyed fruits, rare spices permeated every corner, a subtle reminder of the evening's indulgences. I wandered toward the inner courtyard, where a fountain murmured under the silver moonlight. The reflections of the villa's statues shimmered in the water, almost as if the stone figures were alive, silently judging those who had dared to partake in its feasts. Hidden alcoves and corridors beckoned with unspoken promises of secrets yet to be uncovered. Even now, I could feel the subtle influence of the villa's lessons. Guests carried away more than food. They carried knowledge, alliances, vulnerabilities, and unspoken debts. Each whispered agreement, Each careful observation had the power to shape the social and political landscape of Rome far beyond the walls of this home. The villa was not merely a setting, it was an institution, a crucible of intellect, cunning, and human ambition. And yet, beneath its grandeur and ritual, there remained a simple, quiet truth. Indulgence, when mixed with awareness and subtlety, could reveal the deepest truths of human nature. Here, pleasure was never accidental. It was a tool, a teacher, and a test. The villa had imparted its final lesson for the night. In Rome, to feast was to participate in a game far greater than appetite. As the final guests departed and the torches guttered low, the villa settled into its eternal stillness. Shadows stretched across marble floors, fading gradually as the last oil lamps died. I stood in the triclinium one last time, inhaling the mingled scents of spices, roasted meats, and faint incense that lingered like a memory of the evening. Gaius Aemilius's presence was still felt. Though he was gone, his clever orchestration leaving its imprint in every subtle glance and every quiet lesson. The villa had witnessed ambition, cunning, courage, and folly. It had transformed ordinary indulgence into extraordinary insight, proving that even the simplest act of eating could be a mirror to the soul. I stepped into the moonlit courtyard, the cool air brushing my face, carrying the faint hum of Rome beyond the villa walls. The fountains whispered, the statues observed, and the night held its secrets close. I realized that the villa, timeless and unyielding, would continue to test, reveal, and teach long after the echoes of laughter and whispers had faded. And as I turned to leave, a final thought lingered. The forbidden feasts of Gaius Aemilius were more than meals. They were history, memory, and mystery intertwined. And with that, I whispered softly to the silent marble walls, the gardens, and the fading shadows, "Good night."